"I don't shake hands with employees," the billionaire said with a smug smile. He considered her just an assistant, someone unworthy of respect. 5 minutes later, he found out who she really was. And lost $4 billion because of it. But more. Before we begin, leave a comment indicating which city you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Let me ask you something, have you ever watched your empire crumble before your eyes, because you refused to shake someone's hand? I have. And it all started with a woman I thought was just another junior consultant in a skirt suit. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The boardroom was tense, humming with the low chatter of executives in tailored suits and overpriced watches. Our company, Eastbridge Holdings, was on the brink of something massive, a potential $4 billion partnership that could catapult us from industry leader to global titan. And then she walked in. She didn't burst through the door or wear anything flashy. No designer logo screaming for attention. Just calm, confident steps and a leather-bound portfolio tucked under her arm like it belonged there. I barely looked at her. Just another analyst from our investors' due diligence team, I thought. Her skin was the color of polished mahogany, her hair pulled back in a low bun. Elegant. Professional. Unimportant. She extended her hand to greet me. I folded my arms and smiled coldly. "I don't shake hands with subordinates," I said. The silence that followed was thick. A few of the guys laughed nervously. She didn't even blink. Just pulled her hand back and said, "I'm not your subordinate, Mr. Kessler. I'm here to decide if you're worth a $4 billion investment." That moment changed everything. I wish I could say I played it cool. I didn't. I laughed like it was a joke, tried to cover my discomfort, pretended like she'd misunderstood. I introduced her to the rest of the board, dismissively, as a diversity advisor from the Capital Group. But inside, a quiet panic was beginning to swell. By the end of that meeting, I'd lost everything. Her name was Elise Montgomery. I learned that much later. What I didn't know that morning, what none of us knew, was that she was the granddaughter of Arthur Montgomery, my silent partner and the majority shareholder of Eastbridge Holdings. Arthur had kept her identity quiet for years, grooming her in the shadows, while I believed I was the king of this castle. Elise never raised her voice. Never threatened. Never even so much as sighed. She just asked the right questions. Questions none of my guys could answer. Questions I deflected until I looked like a man dancing around landmines. And then, in the calmest tone imaginable, she stood up and said, "Thank you for your time. Based on what I've seen today, my recommendation is to withdraw all investment from Eastbridge Holdings effective immediately." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. I jumped to my feet. "Excuse me? On what grounds?" Elise turned to face me fully. "On the grounds of arrogance, opacity, and a culture of exclusion. This isn't about just money, Mr. Kessler. It's about leadership. And yours is the kind that poisons everything it touches." She walked out before I could reply. The fallout was swift and brutal. That afternoon, our stock tanked. By morning, 4 of our major clients had pulled out. By the end of the week, Arthur Montgomery himself released a statement confirming the withdrawal of $4 billion in capital, signed off by his granddaughter, Elise, Executive Vice President of Montgomery Capital. And me? I was the fool who lost a fortune because I couldn't see the power sitting right across the table. But this is just the beginning. Because what Elise Montgomery did next, changed not just the future of Eastbridge Holdings, but my life. Forever. By the time I got back to my office, the walls felt thinner. Like they'd heard everything and were whispering behind my back. My phone buzzed non-stop, emails, texts, news alerts, board members demanding an explanation. And all I could hear was her voice, low and calm, "This isn't about just money, Mr. Kessler. It's about leadership." That sentence wouldn't leave my head. I slammed the door behind me and ripped off my tie. My assistant, Meredith, knocked a second later. "Sir, CNBC just went live with the news. Elise Montgomery's statement is trending. Twitter is brutal." I nodded without a word. Meredith lingered. "She didn't come alone, you know," she said quietly. "There was a man with her. Older. I think it was Arthur Montgomery." My stomach dropped. Arthur hadn't stepped foot inside Eastbridge since the acquisition 5 years ago. He let me run the show while he collected dividends. Our deal was clean, he owned 51%, I made 100% of the decisions. Except now, I realized, he'd been making moves in silence. Grooming his heir. Sending her to watch me fail. And I played right into it. Meredith backed out, closing the door behind her. I stood in front of the mirror in my office, watching a man I barely recognized, gray around the temples, jaw tight with pride and panic. My empire was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't even blame anyone else. I had done this. I underestimated a woman who could single-handedly tank my company without raising her voice. But there was something else. Something I hadn't noticed in that boardroom until now. The way she looked at me, not with anger, not even with contempt. Pity. That stung worse than any insult. Our valuation had dropped 19%. Shareholders were circling like vultures. A few even whispered about forcing me out. I needed to do damage control. Fast. So, I called her. "Elise Montgomery speaking." "Elise, this is Daniel Kessler." "Mr. Kessler, I don't believe there's anything left for us to discuss." "There's always something to discuss. Please. Just 10 minutes. Face to face." A pause. "You have 5. She chose the place, Montgomery Tower, top floor. That was deliberate. When I walked into the marble lobby, the receptionist didn't even look up. I wasn't a VIP anymore. Just another suit begging for time. She met me in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the skyline. "Elise," I said, offering a handshake. This time, she didn't even look at it. "Have a seat, Mr. Kessler." So I did. I started explaining. The chaos, the fallout, the media frenzy. How I never intended to offend. How it was all just a misunderstanding in tone. She watched me silently, hands folded neatly on the table. When I finished, she said one thing. "My grandfather trusted you with Eastbridge. He believed in your ability to grow it. What he didn't expect was for you to poison the culture from the inside." I blinked. "We both know what kind of leader you are," she continued. "Your board meetings are theater. Your diversity policies are performance. And your vision is rooted in a world that no longer exists." I tried to push back, but she raised her hand. "I'm not here for a debate. I'm here to tell you what happens next." I sat back, stunned. "We're initiating a full internal audit of Eastbridge Holdings," she said. "We'll be evaluating leadership, financial transparency, and corporate conduct. My grandfather still owns the majority. You work for us now." Just like that. I wanted to rage. Scream. Threaten legal action. But I saw something in her eyes, calm, absolute certainty. She wasn't bluffing. This was a coup. And the worst part? It was deserved. "Elise," I said, my voice breaking for the first time, "I made a mistake. A big one. But I built that company with everything I had. Don't take it from me." She stood up slowly. "No, Mr. Kessler. You're the one who gave it away." And then she walked out. I sat in my penthouse staring out at the city lights. My phone rang, and for once, I didn't pick it up. I just let it buzz against the glass table. In that silence, I started thinking, not about what I'd lost, but who I'd become. Arrogant. Detached. Cruel in ways I never intended but never corrected. Elise Montgomery didn't destroy me. She exposed me. And that, I realized, might be the only chance I had to change. But change always comes with a cost. And this story isn't even halfway over. There's a particular kind of silence that settles when a man realizes his title means nothing. That was me, sitting in my own boardroom, watching a team of auditors, none of whom I'd hired, unpack my company like it was a crime scene. They didn't speak much. Just asked for files, clicked through databases, requested access to internal chats, payroll reports, hiring data. At first, I tried to be gracious, offered coffee, even cracked a joke. They didn't laugh. Elise wasn't in the room, but she might as well have been. Every decision, every signature, every backroom deal I thought no one remembered, they were now staring back at me through spreadsheets and quietly disapproving frowns. The report would go to her. She didn't need to be there. She already knew what they'd find. 5 days into the audit, my CFO, Gerald, came to see me. I'd known him for 12 years, loyal, calculating, a man who could spin any crisis into a footnote. Except today, he looked nervous. "We need to talk," he said, closing my office door. I didn't like his tone. He sat down and slid a file across the desk. "They're not just auditing finances. They've started interviewing staff. So, people are talking, Daniel. About the culture. About the way you run things. About what happened with Elise." I felt my pulse rise. It was one moment. One misunderstanding. Gerald looked at me like I'd grown horns. "Daniel, they're calling it a pattern. Not just from you. From upper management. There are emails, memos, HR complaints that never went anywhere." He paused. "Elise is building a case." That hit me like a brick. A case for what? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The board wasn't just angry about the $4 billion loss. They were starting to see me as the liability. 2 days later, I got the call. "Arthur Montgomery would like to speak with you in person." It wasn't a request. When I walked into his townhouse in the Upper East Side, he was already seated in a leather armchair, holding a tumbler of whiskey and staring at the fireplace like it held the answers to everything. He didn't greet me. Just gestured to the empty seat across from him. Saturday, you know," he said, swirling the glass, "I spent 40 years building companies with men exactly like you." I stayed quiet. Brilliant. Fearless. But blind. "You remind me of my younger self. Only difference is, I learned humility before it cost me everything." His eyes met mine. "You may still have time." "I didn't mean to insult her, Arthur," I said, almost pleading. "I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem, Daniel. You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with respect." He set down the glass. "She doesn't want to destroy you. But she will fix what you broke." That word, fix, echoed in my mind. "Will she take the company?" "She'll save it. Whether you're part of that or not is up to you." That night, I stood in my office long after everyone had gone home. Looked out at the skyline like it could offer advice. Thought about Elise. About how I'd dismissed her, and what it said about me, not just as a CEO, but as a man. The truth was, she didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone shook the floorboards. And I couldn't stop thinking about something else Arthur had said. You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with respect. So simple. So damning. At 3:12 a.m. I wrote a letter. Not for the board. Not for Arthur. For her. "Elise. You were right. Not just about me, but about this entire company. We lost our souls somewhere along the way. I let it happen. I was too proud to see it. This isn't a plea. It's a confession. And if I ever have a place in the future of Eastbridge Holdings, it'll be because I earned it back, starting now. Daniel. I printed it, signed it, and hand-delivered it to Montgomery Tower the next morning. She didn't respond. Not immediately, anyway. But later that week, when I walked into the next audit briefing, she was there. Sitting at the head of my table. And the first words out of her mouth. Let's begin. She didn't look like a conqueror. She looked like she'd simply come home. Elise Montgomery sat at the head of the table, my table, and no one questioned it. Not the auditors. Not the board members. Not even me. I stood there for half a second too long, staring. Mr. Kessler, she said, without looking up from her notes, you're welcome to sit. This is still your company, for now. The room exhaled awkwardly. I nodded and took a seat. Not at the head, not even near it. I sat on the side like a guest in a house I used to own. The next 2 hours were brutal. Elise dissected every aspect of our operations, culture, hiring, product integrity, ethics. She asked questions that made grown men fumble and sweat. Our head of HR visibly shook when she pulled up statistics on promotion gaps between white male executives and everyone else. Our legal counsel turned pale when she referenced non-compliance risks we had conveniently buried. She never raised her voice. Never attacked. She just peeled back the company's polished exterior and showed the rot underneath. And the more she revealed, the quieter I became. Because for the first time, I wasn't just hearing numbers. I was seeing people. People I'd ignored, overlooked, or dismissed. Like her. That afternoon, I returned to my office and found my desk covered in press releases and legal memos. One headline caught my eye. Eastbridge Empire shaken by internal reckoning, culture under fire. Our investors weren't calling anymore. They were leaving. 5 had pulled out by noon. 2 more announced they were re-evaluating. And the firm we were hoping to merge with? Gone. They issued a public statement about values misalignment. It felt like my name had become poison. I sat down, staring at the silence, and for the first time in years. I didn't feel powerful. I felt exposed. And yet, something strange happened that evening. Elise emailed me directly. Mr. Kessler. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. we will meet privately. 1 hour. No staff. No advisors. Just you and me. Bring honesty. When I arrived, she was already there. No assistants. No distractions. Just a legal pad, a bottle of water, and the woman who had reshaped the fate of Eastbridge in under a week. She didn't greet me. Just nodded for me to sit. Why am I here? I asked. To decide what kind of man you are, she replied. She didn't mean it as a threat. She meant it as a crossroads. You can walk away, she continued. Resign. Take your golden parachute, disappear quietly, and this company will survive without you. I clenched my jaw. And if I stay? If you stay, she said, you'll have to start over. From the ground up. No title. No corner office. You'll work for the people you once looked down on. You'll learn humility, or you'll be removed for good. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang. And Daniel, if you stay, I'll be watching. Every move. Every meeting. Every word. I sat back in the chair. My chest felt tight. My ego screamed to run. But something deeper, something older, whispered stay. I built this company, I said. And now you have a chance to rebuild it, she replied. With better hands. Starting with yours. I nodded slowly. I'll stay. For the first time, Elise allowed a small smile. Not warm. Not forgiving. But approving. A week later, I showed up to work in a shared cubicle. My nameplate read Daniel Kessler, Strategy Associate. I'd asked for it myself. My phone didn't ring. My inbox was mostly empty. I had no assistant, no reserved parking, no power. And yet, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. I started attending team meetings I used to ignore. I listened. I took notes. I apologized to junior staff who looked at me like I was a ghost. Some forgave me. Most didn't. I didn't blame them. In the break room, someone had pinned a printout of the company's new values charter. At the bottom, in Elise's handwriting, it read, "Respect isn't earned by title. It's practiced in every interaction." That line stayed with me. Every day. Because the man who once laughed off a handshake had finally learned how to extend one. It's a strange thing, to return to the company you built and not be feared. Not admired. Just, tolerated. People would pass my cubicle, glance quickly, then look away. Whispers followed me like a shadow. I heard them. "That's Kessler. He's the reason the stock tanked." I heard Elise demoted him herself. No one said it to my face. But they didn't have to. The silence did all the talking. And I deserved every word of it. The first project Elise assigned me was an internal report on middle management performance gaps. I thought it was a test. Maybe even a punishment. But it turned out to be something else entirely. To complete the report, I had to sit with department heads I barely knew. I spent days interviewing team leads I used to walk past like they were invisible. Warehouse managers. UX designers. Data engineers. Even our janitorial supervisor. And the things they told me. They weren't angry. They were disappointed. Not because of one moment in a boardroom, but because of years of being unseen. One young woman from our marketing team, Jenna, told me flat out. "You never looked at people, Mr. Kessler. Only output." I didn't defend myself. I just nodded. Wrote it down. It became the first line in my report. A month later, Elise held her first all-staff town hall as interim CEO. She invited everyone, remote, in-person, contractors, even janitors. She opened with a message I'll never forget. Leadership doesn't mean control. It means accountability. We can't build a stronger future on top of a broken foundation. So today, we rebuild. People stood. Clapped. Cheered. I stayed in the back, unnoticed. But for the first time, I didn't feel bitter. I felt grateful to be in the room. Elise looked out at the crowd and then, her eyes met mine. She nodded. That one small gesture meant more than any board vote I'd ever won. That evening, as I walked through the lobby, I saw someone waiting near the security desk. A tall man in a navy suit, holding a leather briefcase. Arthur Montgomery. He motioned for me to walk with him. We stepped outside into the cool evening air. He lit a cigar, offered me one. I shook my head. "I hear you're doing the work," he said. I nodded. "I also hear Elise gave you no shortcuts." "None," I said. Arthur took a long drag. "That means she respects you," he said. "She doesn't waste time on people she's written off." I looked over at him. "Do you think there's a path back? To being CEO? Maybe. But to being the man you should have been?" He tapped the ash from his cigar. "That's a choice you'll have to keep making. Every day." By the end of the quarter, Eastbridge Holdings had stabilized. The press shifted from scandal to transformation. Employee satisfaction scores were up. New hires were more diverse. Old partners started calling again. But I stayed in my cubicle. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. Elise sent me an email one morning, short and direct. "You've earned back a seat at the table. Let me know when you're ready to take it." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked down to the floor where the design team worked, an area I hadn't visited in 5 years. I brought coffee. Sat in. Listened to a pitch from a junior associate about a product redesign I'd never have approved in the old days. It was brilliant. And I told her so. She stared at me like I'd grown another head. Then smiled. Not politely. Genuinely. It was the smallest victory I'd had all year. And somehow, it felt bigger than any deal I'd ever closed. It had been 97 days since I sat at the head of the boardroom table. Not that I was counting. But when Elise called for a quarterly board meeting and included me in the agenda, not as a guest, not as a formality, but as a speaker, I knew something had shifted. I didn't wear the old tailored suit that used to feel like armor. Just a clean shirt, a slim notebook, and the knowledge that this time, I wasn't here to dominate. I was here to contribute. When I walked into that glass-walled boardroom, the air was different. Not hostile. Not reverent. Balanced. Elise was already seated. She didn't look up immediately, just finished writing something in her notebook before finally saying, "Mr. Kessler. Have a seat." Not Daniel. Not sir. Just Kessler. It was perfect. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. No slides. No rehearsed bravado. Just me. "I used to believe leadership was about having all the answers," I said. "I don't anymore." A few board members shifted in their chairs. Not from discomfort, just surprise. I continued, "What I've learned these last few months is that leadership begins with listening. We ignored red flags. We buried culture problems under revenue goals. I did that. And I won't pretend otherwise." I paused, met Elise's eyes. "But I've also learned that change is possible, if it starts from the top and includes the bottom. And I'm proud to say I've seen that change begin here." Then I did something unthinkable, I sat back down without defending myself. The room was silent. Then, Arthur Montgomery, who rarely spoke during meetings, tapped his pen against the table and said, "That's the first honest board presentation I've heard in years." A few others nodded. And Elise? She smiled. That same small, approving smile I was beginning to live for. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. Printed. Signed. From Elise Montgomery. "Daniel. Effective immediately, you are appointed as Eastbridge Holdings Chief Strategy Advisor. This is not a demotion, nor a restoration. It's a redefinition. You will report directly to me. You will have no direct reports, no staff, no power to override. Your influence will be earned, not assumed. In short, you now work the way the rest of us always had to. Let's build something better. Elise." I read the letter twice. Then a third time. And for the first time since the empire started cracking, I felt something resembling peace. That Friday, I received an internal calendar invite from Elise. Subject, lunch. Location, the cafe across the street. Not our tower. Neutral ground. I arrived early. She arrived on time. She wore a navy blazer, no jewelry, no entourage. She looked like someone who had nothing to prove, and everything under control. We sat outside. Ordered quietly. No tension. Just space. After a few bites of salad, she looked at me and said, "You know you're not forgiven, right?" I nodded. "I'm not asking to be." She studied me, then added, "Good. Because forgiveness is personal. But trust? That's professional. And you're starting to earn it." We ate in silence after that. But for the first time, it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was the silence between two people who had stopped seeing each other as enemies. Maybe not quite allies yet, but something close. That night, I stayed late at the office. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. And before I shut my laptop down, I wrote myself an email with the subject line, "Read this if you ever feel like going backwards." It said, "Remember who you were when you shook no one's hand. And remember who she was when she didn't need to raise her voice." Then I hit send. Months passed. Quietly. Productivity was up. Turnover was down. Our annual shareholder meeting, usually a tightly scripted performance, felt more like a conversation. Elise stood at the podium and delivered what might have been the most powerful leadership speech I'd ever heard. No buzzwords. No flashy promises. Just clarity. We will not measure our success only by revenue anymore. We will measure it by the trust we rebuild. With our clients. With our staff. With each other. The crowd erupted. I clapped along with everyone else, no longer at the front, but seated with the other strategy advisors. And honestly, that felt right. But as Eastbridge settled into a new era, the past didn't stay silent for long. It started with a leak. A whistleblower tip forwarded to our compliance team. A vendor we'd used for years, Alcor Systems, was falsifying invoices. Millions in inflated costs. Bribes. False inventory. And guess who had signed off on their contracts? Me. During my prime. The moment Elise saw the file, she called me in. She didn't yell. Didn't accuse. Just slid the report across the desk. "This is your signature, Daniel." I nodded. "I don't remember seeing these details," I said slowly. "You didn't look," she replied. She was right. In the old days, if a deal moved fast and looked clean, I signed it. Trusted the wrong people. Cared more about speed than scrutiny. Now those decisions were coming back to haunt me. Elise tapped the file. "We report this publicly. No spin. No blame shifting. The truth, all of it." I nodded again. "I'll go on the record." She looked at me, surprised. "I made the mess," I said. "I'll help clean it." 2 days later, I sat down with a journalist from the Financial Standard, the same outlet that had once run a glowing profile of me titled, "Kessler's Kingdom." Now, they wanted a different headline. I gave it to them. I didn't hide. I explained the culture. The shortcuts. The ego. I admitted my role, not just in the Alcor scandal, but in setting the tone that allowed it to fester. When the article published, the headline read, "The CEO who owned his failure, Daniel Kessler speaks out." It wasn't a takedown. It was a reckoning. And it marked the first time people inside Eastbridge started looking at me differently, not with reverence, not with scorn. But with cautious respect. One evening, as I packed up to leave, I got a message from Elise. "Come by my office. Doors open." When I arrived, she was standing by the window, arms crossed, watching the city blink below us. "I read the article," she said. I waited. "You told the truth. I owed it." She turned to me, her voice softer now. "People are starting to believe in this place again. That's bigger than either of us." I stepped closer. "You rebuilt what I nearly destroyed." She shook her head. "We rebuilt it. You just had to learn how to build better." A long pause stretched between us. Then she said, "I'm going to recommend you for a board seat." I blinked. "You're serious?" "You won't have voting power," she added quickly. "Not yet. But you'll be there. Where it matters." She handed me a sealed envelope. "Open it when you're ready," she said. "Not tonight. Not while the ink's still wet." I waited until Sunday. Sat in my quiet apartment, early morning light filtering through the blinds, and broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten. Daniel. This isn't redemption. It's responsibility. If you accept this seat, understand, you are not returning to who you were. You are stepping fully into who you've become. Use your voice to elevate others. Use your past to protect this company from repeating it. And never forget, the quietest people in the room often carry the loudest truths. Elise. I folded the letter slowly. Sat in silence. And whispered something I hadn't said in years. Thank you. I didn't wear a power suit. I wore a simple charcoal blazer, no tie, no cufflinks, because the man who walked into that boardroom a year ago had something to prove. But the man walking in now? He had something to protect. When Elise introduced me to the board as a non-voting member, the room was silent. Then Arthur nodded, slowly, like a man watching a former soldier return not for war, but for duty. I took my seat. Not at the head. Not even beside Elise. I chose the far side. A quiet seat. But this time, I was listening with sharper ears, speaking with fewer words, and when I did speak, people leaned in. Because I wasn't selling. I was serving. It happened just as we began planning Eastbridge's new foundation initiative. A call from a number I hadn't seen in years. Vanessa. My ex-wife. The first one. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, when I was still too proud to admit my failures and too stubborn to see hers. I stared at the phone before answering. Vanessa. A pause. You sound different, she said. I feel different. She laughed lightly, like it caught her off guard. Listen, I didn't call to rehash anything. I saw the article. And the speech Elise gave. You're doing good work, Daniel. That means a lot. She hesitated. It's rare, you know. Watching someone actually change. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just said, I'm trying. Before she hung up, she added one thing. Don't stop. A few weeks later, I walked into the cafe across the street from our office, the same place Elise and I had lunch months ago. There was a new barista. Young guy. Nervous. Flustered. The line was long, and a man in front of me started snapping at him. Loud. Entitled. Old me might have said nothing. New me stepped forward. Hey, I said gently. Give the kid a second. We've all had bad first weeks. The man grunted and backed off. The barista looked at me, stunned. When I got to the front, he said, Thanks, sir. I smiled. Don't call me sir. Just get my name right on the cup. It was a small box. Left on my desk with no card. Inside, a single, polished river stone. Engraved with one word. Still. Later that day, I stepped into Elise's office. She was writing, as always. You left this? I asked, holding up the stone. She nodded. Arthur used to carry one just like it. Said it reminded him that even the strongest rivers need quiet places to gather strength. I ran my thumb over the smooth surface. You're not done yet, Daniel, she added. But you've finally stopped fighting the current. Underscore 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 underscore. By now, I wasn't just advising. I was mentoring. Young execs came to me, people who used to avoid my gaze in elevators. Now they brought questions. Ideas. Fears. One of them, a junior analyst named Teo, sat across from me in the break room one afternoon and asked, How did you survive the fall? I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, I stopped trying to be feared, and started trying to be useful. He nodded slowly. That night, I found a note on my desk. You're more than useful. You're proof. I kept that one, too. Spring came quietly. No headlines. No corporate scandal. Just warmth. The kind that sneaks in slowly, through morning light and conversations that don't revolve around crisis. Eastbridge was no longer just surviving. It was leading. And Elise, well, she wasn't just the interim CEO anymore. The board voted unanimously to make her permanent. Not because of pressure. Because of performance. Because she'd done the impossible, rebuilt a broken company without a single raised voice. The morning the announcement went live, I walked into her office with a bouquet of blue orchids, her favorite, according to her assistant. She looked up from her laptop, surprised. Not by the gesture. By the smile on my face. You earned this, I said. She studied me for a second, then nodded. So did you. And for the first time in a very long time, I held out my hand. And she took it. Later that week, I drove out to my old neighborhood. Not the penthouse. The place before all the skyscrapers and stocks. Where I first dreamed of power, thinking it would solve everything. I parked outside the diner where I once ate $3 breakfasts and mapped out empires on napkins. The old man behind the counter recognized me. Kessler, he asked, wiping his hands on a towel. Thought you disappeared into space. Not space, I said, smiling. Just my own ego. He laughed and poured me a cup of coffee without asking. That ego feed in, you better these days. No, I replied. But I stopped feeding it. We talked for an hour. About nothing and everything. It felt like breathing. Elise invited me to speak at the Global Leadership Forum in Berlin. She was headlining the event. I was a surprise guest. My talk was titled, The Day I Lost $4 Billion, and Found Myself. They laughed in the right places. Grew quiet in the honest ones. I ended with this. The worst thing I ever did was underestimate someone because she didn't look like me, talk like me, or lead like I thought a leader should. But the best thing I ever did was admit it, and let her teach me how to rebuild. The standing ovation felt different. Not like validation. Like forgiveness. A few days later, I came back to New York and found a note on my desk. Daniel. You don't need this office anymore. Your voice is louder when you're out there. Come upstairs when you're ready. I climbed 2 floors to Elise's corner suite. It wasn't about the view anymore. It was about the purpose. She was already seated, flipping through a report. Without looking up, she said, We're starting a mentorship foundation for underserved entrepreneurs. I want you to lead it. I blinked. Me? You, she said. The man who learned the hard way, and lived to teach it. And just like that, my next chapter began. On the way down, I shared the elevator with a young woman I hadn't seen before. Maybe early 20s. Nervous. Hugging her laptop like a shield. She looked at me, eyes wide. You're Mr. Kessler, right? Just Daniel. She swallowed. They told us, you used to run this place. I smiled. I used to think I did. She hesitated. Then held out her hand. I didn't pause this time. I shook it. Firmly. Respectfully. Gratefully. Because if I'd learned anything in the past year, it's that sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is take the hand he once refused, and never let go again. It rained the morning Elise called me into her office. The city outside was gray, humming with quiet urgency. But inside the glass walls of her suite, everything felt still. She stood by the window, holding 2 mugs of coffee, one of which she silently offered me. I have news, she said. I braced myself. Another merger. Another crisis. Elijah's stepping down as director of the foundation, she continued. Health reasons. He asked me to find someone who could carry the mission forward. I looked at her, puzzled. Elise, I'm already running operations. I've been building the program. She held up a hand. You misunderstand. She opened a drawer and placed a thin folder on the desk. It had my name on it. Inside, a formal board resolution. A title. President of the Eastbridge Foundation. Permanent. Fully backed. You're not a placeholder anymore, she said. This isn't about repairing what you broke. This is about building what you were meant to. I stared at the paper in my hands. Then back at her. You trust me with this? She smiled. No. I believe in you. The following week, I stood in front of a room full of young entrepreneurs, some still in college, some already creating companies in their garages and bedrooms. They looked like the kind of people I used to overlook. And now, they were all I saw. I ditched the speech I had prepared. Instead, I told them a story. About a man who thought power came from position. Who lost everything because he refused to shake a stranger's hand. And who only became powerful when he learned to sit down, shut up, and listen. They didn't clap right away. They didn't need to. They understood. Weeks later, I found myself standing beside Arthur Montgomery in a garden outside a leadership retreat. He was older. Slower. But still sharp. You know, he said, lighting a cigar, I didn't pick Elise because she was my granddaughter. I raised an eyebrow. I picked her because I knew she'd finish what I started. And fix what I couldn't. He glanced at me. Turns out, she fixed you too. I laughed quietly. She didn't fix me. She showed me the blueprint. He nodded. Same thing. Then, without fanfare, he said, You made me proud, Daniel. Eventually. And walked off. I stood there for a long time, letting the breeze carry those words where they needed to land. One night, alone in my apartment, I opened an old archive on my computer. It was labeled, Kessler Empire, 10-year plan. It was everything I thought I wanted back then. Expansion. Control. Market dominance. I deleted it. Not out of shame. Out of clarity. Because I had built something better. And it didn't need my name on every door to be mine. On the 1-year anniversary of Elise becoming CEO, we held a ceremony at Eastbridge's newly renovated HQ, staff. Press. Old board members. New interns. I stood behind Elise as she gave a speech about the future. About culture. About service. Then she paused. And none of this would have been possible, she said, without a man who chose to stay after he fell. Who chose to build after he broke. Daniel Kessler, please join me. The room clapped. Loudly. I walked up slowly, took the mic, looked around. And said just one thing. I finally shook the right hand. And I never let go. Elise reached for mine. And this time, we shook together.